Welcome to the San Antonio Files. I'm Sanford Nowlin, editor-in-chief of the San Antonio Current. During his decades behind a typewriter, San Antonio iconoclast Sam Kindrick chronicled Texas's outlaw country music scene and a whole lot more. A former San Antonio Express News columnist, reporter, and music writer, Kindrick founded the independent publication Action Magazine in 1975, covering now legendary musicians, including Willie Nelson, Jerry Jeff Walker, Chris Christopherson, Augie Myers, and more. Kindrick's memoir, Outlaw Country Reporter, Misfits, Madams, and Hangin' with Willie, was released this summer by Texas A&M University Press, and now his archives are part of the Wittliff Collections at Texas State University. We welcome him today to KLRN. Glad to have you here, Sam. How you doing?
Sir. It's good to be here.
So talk a little bit about your upbringing. Contrary to the outlaw image you had with Action Magazine, you were raised in a religious household in Junction, Texas. Talk about some of the influences you had there growing up.
I grew up in Junction, Texas with a very religious mother who was a devout Baptist. And my dad died when I was like a few months old. I never knew my father. So I was raised by my mother, and a lot of influence came from an old cowboy by the name of Red Smith. Red was, he kind of filled in, he was a surrogate father. He just filled in for the stuff that I needed to learn. He taught me how to shoot a gun. He taught me how to bridle a horse. He taught me the things that I needed to know. And he taught me how to defend myself. When the kids were picking on me on the schoolyard, you know, Red was he was a original cowboy. And he said that what you do is you get a stick and go upside his head. And I didn't know what that meant, but he explained it to me. And that kept the bullies off. It worked. But I'll never forget Red. He's buried in a little graveyard up on the South Llano River. I took my wife out to visit his grave years and years ago. But he had a lot of influence on me. He taught me what I needed to know. Right. Don't punch women. Don't hit inferior people. Try to help people the best you can. Mind your own damn business. And these are the things that I attribute to Red Smith.
Great.
And he's got a big part in my book.
Absolutely.
Got a good picture of him in there.
It sure is, yeah. You ended up going to Sul Ross University, and a professor there recommended that you pursue journalism and transfer to Southwest Texas, or Texas State as it's called now. At what point did you know that journalism was the right field for you?
I didn't really know until I got into Southwest Texas, and then I wasn't sure either. I didn't have a major.
Right.
That professor's name was Elton Miles, and I was doing themes for other guys and for charging them $10 a piece.
How much money did you make doing that?
Not very much, but he called me in one day and he said, I know you're writing these themes and you're not fooling anybody. And he said, I see a little bit of talent there. He said, what I think you need to do is transfer to San Marcos. I've got a friend there, his name is Joe Vogel, and he just started up a little journalism department. It's kind of a one-man journalism department. And he said, I really think you should transfer to Southwest, and that's what I did. And that's when I met Joe Vogel. And he interested me in the journalism business, and that's kind of how it got started.
So you jumped around to several small papers before you ended up at the San Antonio Express News, where you had a column called Offbeat,
right,
which was known for chronicling some of the area's most colorful characters. I'm thinking of Bunny Eckert, who was a pimp and a gangster, and Teresa Brown, who was a madam, who was had a lot of clients coming in and out of her Castle Hills home, including politicians and business people. What was it that attracted you to sort of writing about and reporting on those kind of people on the margins?
I got the idea from an editor at the San Angelo Standard Times named Tom Steff. Tom said, everybody writes about the heroes. Write about the losers. Nobody ever writes about the losers. And so when I got here to San Antonio, I was drinking beer over here right around the corner in a place called the Melody Room Lounge. And there was a cowboy over there. He was a Choctaw Indian, and he followed the rodeo circuit. He never managed to ride anything. That he got thrown off of everything he got on. They called him Coyote Perry because he used to yip like a coyote when it hit the ground. And I thought, well, why don't I write an article about the losingest cowboy on the RCA tour? And I did. And Perry said, well, he said, I got into rodeo because I got tired of riding that tractor out on the reservation, and I have a bad back. And anyway, the story was about the losingest cowboy on the tour, and it hit the AP wire and wound up on the front page of the London Times, I think. I was told it did anyway.
Well, you also had a piece or a series that was nominated for a Pulitzer during that time. Is that right?
That's true. And the man on the Pulitzer committee that nominated me was Charles Kilpatrick, who was the executive editor of the Express News, who in later years fired my ass.
That was after Murdoch took the paper over, right?
The day after Murdoch bought the paper, I got fired.
And that led you to found Action Magazine.
Right, I had to do something. I had 3 kids at home and no way to feed them, and I got fired without any severance pay at all.
Wow.
I had written another book, the first book that I wrote, and they gave me that in lieu of severance pay, paperback. And so I left Express News with a big resentment.
Yeah, as I understand, you were not shy about talking about Mr. Kirkpatrick and his antics.
That's true.
You had your son throw the initial copies of Action Magazine inside the Express News building to sort of make a point.
No, the son didn't do it. I did it.
Oh, you did it. Okay.
Like here I am, you know, like like Daniel standing in front of the lion's den and flipping of the bird. That's like Charlie even knew about it.
Right. One other thing I noticed that was interesting in your book was you had an opportunity after you got fired from the Express News to relocate to another newspaper in another city. When you were covering Willie, a lot of the action going on there was up in Austin, yet you decided you wanted to stay in San Antonio. What is it about San Antonio that made it important for you to stay here and sort of make it your home base?
I had a job offer at the Houston Post. That was the deal. And I even went down to Houston and walked around on the streets, and I noticed all that green moss in the gutters and along the street. You know, it's very humid in Austin. I mean in Houston, and you got a lot of moss and stuff. And I looked at the ground. I said, I'm going back to San Antonio.
So talk a little bit about how you got Action funded, right? Because you were let go without a severance. You know, journalism is not a high-paying job. How did you get the money together to start publishing your own magazine?
Well, Harry Jersey was the head of Lone Star Beer at the time, and I knew Harry wasn't too fond of Express News. So I went to him and I told him, I said, I want to start this non-existent entertainment paper, and I don't have any money. And I told him, I said, I'll write about Willie, I'll write about Jerry Jeff, I'll write about Rusty Weir and all these people, but I need the bucks to get it started. And he wrote me a check for $1,000. I went to San Antonio Press, and there was the owner of San Antonio Press at that time was Joe Medellin. And he and his 2 brothers were running this printing press. And I told him what I wanted to do, and told him I didn't have very much money. Harry Jersey had given me enough money to get that first print. And they said, okay. And so thank God for Joe Medellin and his brothers. And that's how Action Magazine got started.
And there was a Lone Star Beer ad on the back of every...
Back covered for years. Started out with Lone Star.
And your mom, as I understand it, refused to read it because it had a beer advertisement.
That's right. I don't know that she ever read it.
The Action Magazine is remembered for chronicling what was then the nascent outlaw country scene. Right. And you mentioned some of those figures, Willie and Jerry Jeff. What was it about that music that attracted you and made you want to write about it and broadcast its importance to the rest of the world?
It was freedom music. It was unfettered. Those guys just walked into studios and started cutting records. A lot of them left Nashville, and Willie did. At that time, Willie said, well, if they won't record me in Nashville, they'll record me in Austin. And he started out over in Bandera and then moved on over to Austin. And I didn't know that this redneck rock thing was forming, or progressive country, or outlaw country, or whatever it just name. It was just a bunch of raggedy musicians that didn't cut their hair and smoked dope and cussed a lot, and they were just different. They were different from the sequins and the glitter and the Nashville scene, and they called them outlaws.
So did they remind you of the outsiders that you wrote about in your column at the Express News to some degree?
Of course.
Yeah.
They were outlaws too. By outlaw, I don't mean they were lawbreakers, but they broke the whatever you want to call it, the aura. The country
Right.
music became disorganized, and that was the beginning of the movement. They called it progressive country. I don't think that was good. I think redneck rock was about the best.
Was that your description of it, redneck rock?
I called it redneck rock.
Yeah. You got to know Willie pretty well during that time period, and we were just recalling that when Red-Headed Stranger had not come out yet, he played a cassette of it for you.
Yeah.
And you weren't quite sure that the listeners were ready for that yet.
We were friends back when it all started, and we pulled up behind a nightclub over on Perrin Bottle Road called the Foxy Lady Saloon, and that's where I heard the tape. Willie, we sat out there in his car and he played the tape, and all the way through. And he had these concept albums before, and I told him I didn't think that thing would really sell that well. Of course, that term went platinum and everything else. So it was the biggest one he had at that time. Maybe the biggest one he ever recorded. I don't know.
So Red-Headed Stranger took off despite your predictions.
Yeah, but I never knew anything about music anyway.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about the kind of coverage you were doing in Action. You were very much writing about the musicians as personalities as opposed to reviewing records. Why didn't you review records like a lot of other music publications did?
I never thought I was qualified to review anybody else's work, so I never did try to. I thought record review people just didn't appeal to me at all. Everybody's gets his own shot at it, and what you think is good may not be what I think is good. But the whole deal was that I like the freedom of it, and people like Rusty Weir and those guys were writing their own stuff, and I always leaned toward the writers, and that's what attracted me to Nelson. I didn't know anything about the music, but I heard the lyrics, and I knew there was something there.
He attracted an interesting crowd back then. I think in the book you talked about him sort of adopting strays. Could you talk a little bit about the crowd Willie attracted in the 70s?
The very first Willie Nelson picnic, which was held at Dripping Springs, that's when the rednecks and the dopers all got together, drank beer and smoked dope and became friends. that was actually what merged the two factions, and it was right there in that cow pasture at Dripping Springs.
On the stage, it wasn't just country western musicians either. Leon Russell, you pointed out, was a surprise appearance. It was a huge rock star of the day.
Well, Leon and Willie were friends for years, and those guys didn't label music like the public does. I mean, a good musician was a good musician. Now, Willie always said there's just two kinds of music: good music and bad music. Uh-huh. And he didn't like labels, and neither did Leon. And Leon was a genius. He was another musical genius.
At that time, in the book you talked about a lot of the drug use that was going around, and on Willie's bus, that was the time you saw the devil. Tell me about that.
I went from alcohol into as Ray Wally Hubbard used to say, we decided that cocaine might be the answer to our drinking problem. And that's when we switched over. And that was the beginning of the end for me. And so a lot of people were doing hard drugs at the time. I'm not talking about the needle, I'm talking about snorting it, cocaine and methamphetamine or whatever, but that's where I got introduced to that stuff. And Willie snapped off quick. He put a ban on it real quick, said no hard drugs. You can smoke all the marijuana you wanted to, but no drugs. And he had a sign in the bus that said, if you're wired, you're fired. So what we were doing, we were hiding from Willie at that time. And I went on the road with him for a short time.
Those experiences, that sort of drug lifestyle, that was something that in the 80s, while you were running Action, you were writing stuff critical of the sheriff at the time and his law and order ordinances and whatnot. And my understanding is that there was a pretty widely publicized bust where you ended up getting thrown in jail.
Exactly. I made the front page. I made the front page of the San Antonio Light and the inside page of the Express and News. That was the first time I got busted. And then there was another bust after that. They had me all ready for prison, and I was supposed to go to prison. And that's another long story, but I didn't get to prison.
Yeah, that made a big difference in your life, as I understand it from the book. You sort of made a promise to a higher power.
I quit doing anything any stronger than a Tylenol on October the 16th, 1989. And I was jailed, and they were getting ready to sentence me to 10 years. And I remember that I had made a plea at that time. I asked God to get me out of that trap. And I was in a holding cell in the Bexar County Jail, and there was a gigantic inmate in that cell with me, and he was doing his number 2 business on the one toilet in that little tiny room, and it smelled horrible, and it was hot in there, and I was going to prison, I knew, and I looked over at that guy, and I said, God, if you'll get me out of this trap, I'll never snort another line of cocaine or methamphetamine, and I'll never take another drink of whiskey. And I never did.
And obviously that was not what kept you writing. I mean, you continue to write. You came out with this memoir.
Don't ask me why I wrote that book, because I can't answer you. I've wondered about it myself.
Really?
But it came out. And there's so much more that I should have put in it.
How much of telling that story, I know you said you didn't necessarily think through why you did it, but how much of that story, now that you look back on it, is about relating your experience with sobriety to other people?
My whole story is a recovery story. Yeah. It's I got into a God-based outfit, organization, and I'll keep it anonymous. I won't talk about it. Although Hubbard got into the same one that I did, and Chris Alferson too. We can talk about Chris now because he's passed on, but he had over 42 years in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'll let people figure out how I got sober. But when I say sober, I don't mean I'm just not doing drugs and drinking alcohol. There's more to sobriety than that, and it's a God-based program. And so what I've more or less have done is turn my will and my life over to the care of a higher power, and that's our nickname for God. And it's worked pretty good for me. So I haven't had a drink or put anything any stronger than an aspirin in my system since October the 16th, 1989.
Well, congratulations on that. Yeah, yeah. When you look back on that era you chronicled in Texas music, what do you think you'd like people to know about it? Because it's so legendary in a way now. So many people sort of look at Willie and Waylon and Chris Christopherson as icons, but you knew them as people.
Yeah, they were people, and there's still people like them out there. Willie didn't set out to become an icon, and neither did Christopherson or any of those guys. They were just out there having a good time, basically. But some of the stuff they wrote is indicative of an uprising, is what it was. It was a protest to the rinky-dinky stuff, you know, that Nashville was putting out. So people like, Leon Russell is another one. A complete different lifestyle and evolves today. And you see new ones here with the kids with the green hair and all that stuff. I don't look down my nose at any of those people, because you don't know what you're looking at out there.
So when you see those kids with the green hair, do you think what they're doing is more akin to what was going on in outlaw country than the stuff that's going on in Nashville right now?
Oh, it's all just a protest.
Uh-huh.
Right.
When you say protest, was it just against Nashville, or do you think that there were bigger things they were saying about American society and our priorities as a country and where we should be headed?
No, I don't think there's all that deep thought went into it. I think it was a spontaneous thing. It was freedom. And Janis Joplin sang it, and it was Christopherson's song. Freedom's just another word for nothing else to lose. And that's kind of what the whole thing was all about.
When you look at the book that just came out, is there something that people should take away from it in terms of a larger philosophy of Sam Kindrick and the way you view the world?
No, it's entertainment. I wrote it for entertainment. And if somebody can get some kind of a spiritual thing out of it, that's fine. Or it wasn't meant that way. I just wrote it as it came out. And if I write any more, it'll be the same way. It's just got to be spontaneous. That's why the book, I didn't have a beginning and an end. It just worked out that way.
Right, right. You've also, as you point out in the book, even through sobriety, I mean, you faced life challenges. You've lost 2 sons, you've battled cancer, but you have a great relationship with your wife for more than 30 years now. Could you talk a little bit about how sobriety has helped you endure some rough times?
Sobriety, I wouldn't have lived if I hadn't gotten sober. And my first wife passed away, and the one I've got now, I've been with her for over 30 years, and we have a super, I call it a kick-ass fairy tale life. That's what it is.
The outlaw country movement, I hear people all the time in Nashville, I hear people all the time elsewhere dropping Willie Nelson's name, mentioning Jerry Jeff, all these kind of people like that. What do you think that the legacy of that music is that you chronicled through the 70s and 80s?
Freedom. Freedom to express themselves the way they wanted to. And that's why I never tried to critique any of it. It was coming out naturally. And that's why it was so great, and it still is. And you still have some local guys that still do it too. They write their own music. Guys like Claude Morgan and Hector Saldana. These are my friends. And,
so it's exciting for you to see another generation continuing to embrace music that's not cookie cutter, music
sure.
that's not produced in a factory in Nashville.
Like Hector and his Crayolas. It includes his brother. It started with his brother, and now it's his kids. And it evolves, and they pass it on. It's just like the recovery from drugs and alcohol. We pass it on to the people that are coming up. So the message is that there's a power greater than us, and that's going to be the answer. It's a spiritual thing.
Anything else you want to touch on about that era, or any of the musicians that you came into contact with?
The musicians had so much to do with my life, and I looked up to Nelson and all of them. I mean, I learned from all of those guys. But some of the local people, you know, that had a lot of influence on me. People like Hector and his brothers. I remember, I wrote the very first story ever written about Hector Saldana when he wasn't old enough to drink, in a place called the Warehouse Club. And there's Hector with his little brother, and they're sitting in there making Hispanic type rock and roll, whatever you want to call it. And those people, they attracted me, and they still do. I love them all.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us about that invigorating period in Texas music and about Action Magazine and your very interesting life.
Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the San Antonio Files. I'm Sanford Nowlin. Happy trails.